Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. You are going to hear exactly why Brett Kavanaugh, the Supreme Court, I think in a 5-4, 6-3 majority, will give Trump at least partial immunity for a speech that categorically did not break any laws. Hit subscribe. I want you to listen to this right now. Hit subscribe, ladies and gentlemen.
The Supreme Court majority wrote the following, and with all due respect, justices, women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that. Clearly.
About to realize what? What are they about to realize, Mr. President? This is exactly what Democrats always do. They telegraph their losses. They know very well Trump will be given, and probably already has been given, partial immunity, meaning that he's not immune from criminal prosecution for an actual crime. However, a speech that precedes criminal activity is covered, because the criminal activity had nothing to do with Trump's speech. He did not tell anyone. He used the word peaceful. He did not know anyone that committed a crime. That is why the Supreme Court is looking at this, even though lower courts deemed Trump not immune, because the lower courts are politicized. Which is why we saw the Supreme Court in Colorado overruled 9-0, unanimous Supreme Court ruling. I want you to listen to this again. What does this mean? If you're a Democrat worried about Trump's words and his rhetoric and his speeches that lead to chaos and criminal activity, we'll get to Chuck Schumer and Kavanaugh in a second. What does this mean, Democrats? Where is the expert on Democratic Party liberal rhetoric that leads to chaos and criminal activity? Hit subscribe right now to read my writing in The Hill, The Huffington Post, Salon, The Jerusalem Post, The Federalist. Other publications, go to hagoodman.com. Subscribe also to the Stock Market Crash channel and the Bitcoin Crash channel. I think both will tumble, unfortunately.
Much you right about that. Electoral or political power, justices. Women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that. Clearly.
Why is Vice President Kamala Harris and Chuck Schumer behind the Supreme Court? Why are they clapping and standing? Why are Democrats clapping and standing when Biden says, you're about to realize, and then he, speaks in tongues, we have no clue what he's saying. You're about to realize, who knows what, I don't even know what he said after.
That's just how much you're right about that. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that.
What did he just do to the Supreme Court? Did he try to say you're about to realize something that Chuck Schumer was alluding to? What did he say? You're about to realize, and so he knows, Democrats know that Trump is going to be given partial immunity. But what is he saying? I have no clue what he's saying. If there's a wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrat who speaks Biden, this new language, this new political language that you need the Rosetta Stone to, comprehend or decipher, what is he saying? Is he trying to say that you'll soon realize through some kind of intimidation? Is that what he's trying to say? Is he trying to say what this man Let's see. This is Schumer a couple years back. And so always remember, when they talk about Trump and his rhetoric, what they really mean is they want to say anything infinitely worse than anything Trump has ever said, and then accuse Trump of heated and divisive rhetoric and polarizing words. Hit subscribe if you're new to this channel. Listen to this. Biden did almost the exact same thing.
All women. Fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price.
Look at all the good liberals cheering at a blatant statement of vengeance, vitriol, venom. And then we had Justice Kavanaugh, somebody go after Justice Kavanaugh. Why is it that Democrats are allowed to intimidate the Supreme Court, but Trump complains about a judge and it's the end of the world, there goes democracy, Republicans are evil and horrible and bad? But they get away with much worse. The rhetoric on the left is infinitely worse, more vile than anything Trump has ever said. And the hypocrisy is so unbelievable. The arrogance is just unbelievable.
To realize just how much you political power. You're about to realize just how much you right about.
You're about to realize, as always with Biden, he stumbles over his words. He has no idea what he's saying. So what is the Supreme Court about to realize? Good, morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrats. These justices, the liberal ones included, should not be intimidated by Democrats. And you better believe, you rest assured that Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett and Roberts and Alito, definitely Alito and Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, Roberts, all of them, Clarence Thomas, Democrats are always trying to intimidate the Supreme Court because what they do is unconstitutional. That's why even the liberal Supreme Court justices overturned the Colorado ban. What they do continually is unconstitutional. Hit subscribe if you're new to this channel. Now listen to Justice Alito. The reason Biden did this, and this is why I believe Kavanaugh and everyone else at the Supreme Court, even one or two of the liberal justices, have already given Trump partial immunity. Democrats know they lost. So during the State of the Union, they already know that Trump was given partial immunity. A speech is not against the law, Democrats. You don't have to be a legal scholar. You don't even have to go to law school. It's basic logic. You're accusing Trump of, driving a motorcade under the president. A president is protected from driving a motorcade. He's immune from any possible, God forbid, accident. God forbid. Presidents can destroy countries like Obama with Libya. Okay, Bush with the numerous countries that he ended up. Bush, Cheney, and Rumsfeld with their decision making. Terrible decision making. But this was a speech. Now they're trying to say the speech was not covered under presidential immunity. Even the Supreme Court is going to give Trump another victory. Of course it is. You have to be stupid and completely ignorant. If there's like a legal scholar or an Ivy League educated scholar that says that Trump wasn't immune, performing a speech that was polarizing, oh yes he is. It's basic logic. He used the word peaceful. He was performing a speech. He wasn't even there during the criminal activity. He didn't know anyone who committed crimes. And oh, by the way, you have Vivek Ramaswamy, who has a particular viewpoint that completely undermines the special counsel in other ways. But here's Justice Alito talking about how how detrimental and harmful the rhetoric from Democrats have been. And nobody, they talk about Trump polarizing, nobody is more polarizing than highly educated, morally superior liberal Democrats who disown friends and family, who become so apoplectic when the name Trump, it's like this Pavlovian response to the word Trump, where they just like frothing and they can't, they can't seem to control themselves. And oh, by the way, Biden, just like Schumer, intimidated the Supreme Court because they know Trump is going to get the immunity victory. He doesn't even need complete immunity. He needs partial immunity. They can say that the speech was covered, but you know what? The criminal activity, if you could link it to Trump, so be it. And they won't be able to link it to Trump. So they already have, that's like the biggest victory he could get. That speech had categorically absolutely nothing to do with the criminal activity that day in January, which was terrible. I condemn it. But do Democrats condemn the billions in property damage that their words led to? And I agree with why people peacefully demonstrated. Hit subscribe right now. Listen to Samuel Alito. Listen to this man, Democrats. You care so much about civility. Now listen to this man.
So one of the most remarkable features about the court in an age of incessant leaks is the confidentiality that long covered its internal deliberations. Unfortunately, that changed this last term with the horrific and completely unprecedented leak of your draft majority opinion in Dobbs. How has the leak affected the court?
Now I want the morally superior, highly educated progressives and liberal Democrats, the morally superior among us, to understand that their vitriol and venom and their intimidation of the pillars of the Constitution, the democracy that we have, the Supreme Court is one of the pillars of our democracy, that simply losing in the Supreme Court, Democrats and morally superior, left-leaning, wonderful liberals and leftists, and very educated, simply losing in the Supreme Court isn't grounds for intimidating justices, number one. Number two, you do things that are unconstitutional, Democrats, all the time, like trying to ban Trump, which is what despots, authoritarians, and totalitarians do, in addition to intimidating the Supreme Court like you do all the time in this speech, the State of the Union, Chuck Schumer, and now listen to Samuel Alito, Justice Alito, talk about the repercussions.
It was a grave betrayal of trust by somebody, and it was a shock because nothing like that had happened in the past. So it certainly changed the atmosphere at the court for the remainder of last term. The leak also made those of us who were thought to be in the majority in support of overruling Roe and Casey targets for assassination, because it gave people a rational reason to think they could prevent that from happening by killing one of us. And we know that a man has been charged with attempting to kill Justice Kavanaugh. It's a pending case, so I won't say anything more about that. But that was last term. Now we're in a new term. I think that all of us want to, all of the justices, and I think the people who work in the building, we have a wonderful staff, I'll add that, want things to get back to normal, the way they were before all this last term, before COVID, get back to normal to the greatest degree possible. And that's what we hope will happen. And I think everybody is working on that. During my 16 years on the court, the justices have always gotten along very well on a personal level. I think the public, when they read our opinions, probably misses that. We sometimes, you can see by reading those opinions, we sometimes disagree pretty passionately about the law, and we have not in recent years been all that restrained about the terms in which we express our disagreement. I'm as guilty as others probably on this score, but none of that is personal, and that is something that I think I wish the public understood.
Ladies and gentlemen, when Democrats lose, instead of and you can see, look at Schumer right here. Look at Schumer. I mean, he's about to go cheer and yell, and the Supreme Court was intimidated. D'Artagnan, thank you to my super chat. Thank you. The Supreme Court was intimidated last night by Joe Biden, the President of the United States of America. Could you imagine if Trump had done this? Could you imagine if Trump had said, let's see.
Electoral or political, electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that.
You're about to realize, and then he speaks in Biden. It's a new language that only wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrats can understand. It's a new language. It's the language of democracy. You're about to realize more than you know. Why are Democrats so willing to put people's lives at risk, while at the same time saying that Trump's words put people's lives at risk? And by the way, there was an unarmed woman whose life was taken that day. In addition to the woman whose life was taken that Biden was forced into, and then he mispronounced her name. He called her the USC Trojans football coach. And so it's like, why are Democrats so willing to allow hurtful, harmful, malicious, vile rhetoric to be leveled at one of the pillars? The Supreme Court is the highest, most esteemed court, not only in the United States of America, but perhaps also in the world. They know that it's not just Kavanaugh, it's everyone else. I'm not going to say it's going to be unanimous, but it could be 5-6-3. There might be a liberal justice who says, look, you know what? Trump, he's immune from prosecution over speech. The DC case, if you read the indictment, does not accuse him of rebellion. It accuses him of performing a speech that led to a rebellion. That's different from Trump engaging in rebellion. Do you see the difference, ladies and gentlemen? And the Supreme Court knows this. The Supreme Court knows this. They already know this. Who is Biden to admonish the Supreme Court? I want to know, like, do Democrats, do they not understand the hypocrisy here? And by the way, did I not tell you it would be a unanimous Supreme Court ruling? Did I not tell you that each of the criminal cases, Georgia, each of them, Florida, D.C., would amount to nothing? All of media has made billions of dollars hyping up these cases. I told you from the very, very beginning, nothing would happen with them. And I said there would be a unanimous Supreme Court decision. And it was. Who is Biden to reprimand the Supreme Court when the entire planet already saw Biden, in his own words, heard him in a bribery and graft scheme? And the fact that Democrats say, no, it didn't happen, we already saw the tape. He said, all right, you're going to get the $1 billion in loan guaranteed. So when they get caught with their hands in the cookie jar, Democrats all the time, with their pants down literally, oh, don't bring my name up. You better not be referring to me. And they just, oh, no, never happened. Ladies and gentlemen, he has telegraphed another Supreme Court victory for Trump. This is pretty categorical, I wouldn't say categorical, but it's pretty obvious. The writing's on the wall. When Democrats are at the State of the Union reprimanding the Supreme Court, they know what's next. They already got their layup blocked in Dikembe Mutombo style. Shaquille O'Neal, Moses Malone, Wilt Chamberlain. They tried to they tried to score a ban of Trump. Didn't work. It was a unanimous Supreme Court decision. Now the Supreme Court is going to rule on immunity after lower courts sided with Biden. Do you want to know why they're going to look at the case? Because the lower courts utilize the indictments against Trump as the reasoning. The indictments are written as if they were written by MSNBC producers, writers. I mean, you might as well have a consultant for the DNC write these indictments. That's why the Supreme Court's going to give Trump partial immunity. He's immune from prosecution over a speech. A speech is protected. Democrats cannot convict Trump over a speech because a president is allowed to perform a speech anytime he wants, or she wants eventually. I think Hillary Clinton will replace Biden. And again, I was saying that he's going to be replaced a long time ago. Nobody believed me, and now he's going to be replaced. But this is the reason that Democrats know already. This is basically the writing on the wall that the Supreme Court is going to give Trump partial immunity. Because he's not going to be able to reprimand the Supreme Court again. And this is his chance. He's trying to intimidate them because he knows very well, and Democrats know very well, and everyone in D.C. knows very well that Trump will get partial immunity. He might not be immune from the prosecution, which doesn't matter because the special counsel, the highly partisan special counsel, which is what despots and authoritarians and totalitarians do, go after their direct political rivals, indict them under nonsensical charges. They might say, well, the speech is not, he's immune from the speech. Go ahead and do what you want with the indictment. But that is the indictment. So there goes the indictment. There goes the trial. And anyway, it's going to go past November. It really doesn't matter. There isn't going to be a trial for this. He's going to, the special counsel is going to be dissolved. One of the first things Trump does. He's not going to keep Jack Smith as part of the executive branch. But listen to this again. What does this mean? You tell me. I don't know what it means. You tell me if you're a morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat. What does this mean? What does this mean? Good Democrats who love the country and the Constitution of democracy.
Women are not without electoral power.
Who said this? Nobody ever said this, but go on.
Excuse me, electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that.
You're about to realize what? Just how much. You're about to realize. What are you about to realize? I want to know this. What are the justices going to realize? Good, morally superior Democrats. What are the justices going to realize? What will they realize? I don't know. And now look at the reaction, the gleeful. It's like you gave like, oh my God, the Supreme Court was intimidated in front of everyone. Now look at Democrats are happy.
Clearly.
What are you cheering about, Vice President Harris? That the Democratic president has just intimidated the Supreme Court, just like Kavanaugh did, which led directly to somebody trying to take Justice Kavanaugh's life? About to realize what? My God, the hypocrites. My God.
Clearly, those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women.
What does the power of women have to do with the Constitution? Typical, completely irrational liberal logic. You take what's constitutional and unconstitutional. Leave it to the states. That's what that was about. And then, oh, by the way, the churches, the buildings throughout the country that were destroyed by activists on the left who vote Democrat. I don't see Kinzinger or Cheney or Vice President Harris or Schumer or Pelosi caring about the billions in property damage the summer before January. And again, I agree with why people peacefully demonstrated, but I don't see them worrying about property damage and destruction and chaos and law breaking when their words directly correlate to that. Let's listen to the immunity, like some breakdown on the immunity issue.
A Harvard law professor, Alan Dershowitz is with us, and Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Jordan, let me start with you. First, you were involved, the ACLJ was involved in this issue representing the Republican Party of Colorado. I did sense that a lot of the arguments you put forward were actually considered by justices. That was my take. Your reaction?
Yeah, we actually have a side-by-side that we put up today on our broadcast where you can see our brief and then see the majority opinion today and see kind of the language used. And I'm not saying the justices took it verbatim, but I'd be pretty excited about what our ACLJ team, our legal team put together on this case. And I think with Justice Barrett summed it up right. All that Americans need to take away, as you said, Sean, is that all 9 justices agree that this is the wrong process. And that's it. On this matter, that states, secretaries of states, and random officials at the state level should have no role in deciding what presidential candidates on the ballot. And let's not forget, it was not just Democrats, but plenty of rhino Republicans who took the same position as those Democrats who wanted to remove President Trump from the ballot this way. And the Supreme Court told them, even 3 liberal members of the Supreme Court, no, you can't do this, 9-0. Now, on to immunity. We've done those cases. We did those cases when the president was in office, and you remember Adam Schiff was obsessed with getting his tax returns. It's all going to come down to that question presented. And I said, Jack Smith, that may have been his biggest problem with this whole issue, is the question presented that was written by the court, Sean, which says, let's look at actual official acts of the president and whether or not official acts of the president are those acts then immune from prosecution. And I could see how this case gets a decision at the Supreme Court, Sean, and then has to be sent down all the way back to a district court to decide official versus unofficial acts. And again, this not affecting President Trump in his reelection efforts.
Democrats, the D.C. case states that Trump was not president anymore when he performed the speech. Essentially, he was no longer president. Okay? They know that he was president. Okay? And so there you go. There you go. Let's continue.
Professor Dershowitz, on the issue of immunity, all of us agreed that the court had an obligation to take that case up, but I know, Greg, yourself, I felt the same way. I wasn't sure that they would. Rightly, they did take that issue up. How do you see the arguments falling in that case?
Well, as you know, I predicted the outcome of this case exactly, how the court would decide 9-0 using the fifth section of the 14th Amendment. On the issue of immunity, I'm going to make a prediction here, too. I think both sides argue too broadly. I think Trump was wrong to have his lawyers say that if a president orders the SEALs to kill his opponent, he can be immunized unless he gets impeached first. That went too far. The answer should have been, of course not. Now let me explain. But I also think the lower court went way too far by having no immunity whatsoever and saying that whatever a president may have had immunity while in office, he loses that once he leaves office. I hope and I suspect that the court granted cert in this case in order to come out with a nuanced decision that focuses on precisely what are presidential acts. And if they're within the scope of presidential acts, then they have to go beyond the presidency itself. Let me give you an example. President Eisenhower in 1954 sends troops down to implement Brown versus Board of Education. One of the children or one of the police officers is killed. And the new president coming in, a Democrat, years later, wants to indict Eisenhower for having done that, even though it was in his presidential authority. I think we would all agree that there has to be some immunity, and we would all agree that he can't have total immunity for everything he did as a politician or as an individual. So I think the Supreme Court, hopefully, will come out with a nuanced decision that will give guidance to the lower courts as to when immunity is applicable, when it's not applicable. We can bring the country together on this issue as well, instead of simply having extreme views on both sides.
You know, I actually concur with what you just said. And I think
when people say, like, oh, well, this will bring the country together. The current Democratic Party, it's a religion. The people who vote for Trump will also vote in great many voters of Trump will vote for RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Rand Paul, Vivek Ramaswamy, not necessarily Nikki Haley. There's a certain foreign policy and domestic policy guide a Trump voter's decision. Blind ideology or tribalism guides most Democratic Party voters. They just think it's moral. They think they're morally superior. It's like almost a cult. Anyone, even somebody who slurs his speech and can't find his way out of a room and makes up words and, doesn't communicate at all effectively, even that person could become president. They'll vote for anyone not named Trump. It doesn't matter about ideology or policies. Categorically, the economy is not good. What's taking place in terms of immigration is a catastrophe in many ways. Democrats caused those problems, and they say, well, put more money so we can expedite judicial rulings. It's like, well, obviously there's a backlog because you allowed too many individuals to come in without legal, in a manner that was not legal. So obviously there's a backlog of individuals. I want dreamers to become citizens. I do. Trump offered that. He said, build the wall, give the funding, and dreamers will become citizens. That's a fact. And Democrats said no. But I want to just go really quickly. This is really interesting also. So I think Professor Dershowitz is right. You know what? Let's go.
I think, Greg, what Professor Dershowitz is saying is that the argument of absolute immunity probably is too broad, and a more nuanced judgment of the court, I think, would probably be more appropriate in this case, and maybe even the better argument for the court. Your take?
Well, I think the Supreme Court looked at the circuit court decision and said, hey, you went way too far. You're dismissing any notion of immunity, even if a president acts consistent with his duties. That is absurd logically. And it's inconsistent, by the way, and this is the important part, with the Supreme Court precedent 4 decades ago that a president does have absolute immunity from civil lawsuits as long as his actions fall within the outer perimeter of his official acts. Well, Sean, the exact same reasoning applies to criminal prosecutions. If it's otherwise, my goodness, the chilling effect on presidential decision-making would trigger paralysis. Instead of a chief executive, so, America would be ruled by a committee of lawyers. They'd be afraid to do anything out of fear of future prosecution.
Greg, let me ask you this. Would a more nuanced version versus the argument of absolute immunity maybe be, of course, you have freedom of speech, but you can't yell fire in a crowded building? Would that be... Exactly. Would there be an analogy there?
Yes.
And you would expect the court to do that.
And Jordan said this as well. I suspect the current justices will extend the existing immunity standard in civil actions to criminal cases and then remand the Trump case back to the trial court to decide whether Trump's acts are covered as
So what they've done already is basically give Trump immunity, okay? They're not going to allow lower courts to say that a president isn't immune for a speech. That is a terrible precedent for a number of reasons. And so Biden knew that, which is why if you watch the beginning of this live stream, he went after and tried to intimidate and marginalize the Supreme Court in front of everyone, which is the most polarizing. Biden to Charlemagne the God, Biden to the Supreme Court. Biden has done and said things that were infinitely more polarizing than anything Trump has ever said or done. But media is predominantly composed of Democratic Party voters, so they don't care. All liberal activists, essentially. And so they don't care. The arrogance and the hubris and the entitlement is unbelievable. Hit subscribe if you're new.
It will take up Trump's immunity case at the end of April. The decision's expected in June. This will put Jack Smith's January 6th case on hold for now. Shannon Bream is in D.C. with more. Shannon.
Yeah, this is a significant delay, Jesse, to what Jack Smith had hoped would be a trial starting March 4th. That's clearly not happening. We weren't sure whether the Supreme Court would get involved or not because the D.C. Circuit, which is that appellate level just before the Supreme Court, had a very lengthy, detailed decision saying that the immunity case would not be a winner for President Trump. They gave him a big loss. So they went to the Supreme Court and asked for a stay. What the court did was go beyond that. Not only stay the case, but say we're actually going to hear it. We're told that briefing will happen in the next few weeks. They will likely hear this case the week of April 22nd. That means that from that point on, we wait. And normally these big decisions come at the end of June. This one has been expedited, though, so it may come ahead of that. But until then, that lower court is on hold. Jack Smith cannot proceed at all with any of this January 6th case against the former president. So we'll wait to see how the arguments go. But remember, once the Supreme Court makes ultimately its decision in this case, then that trial court unpauses, where Judge Chutkan has had the entire thing on pause. I would imagine the Trump team is going to argue at that point, if he loses on the immunity issue, that they need several weeks, if not a couple of months, before they can even begin to think about restarting the case, which would then throw it probably to late summer, early fall. And all of this, of course, right in the middle of the election. Jesse.
So, Shannon, if he does get a disfavorable ruling by the Supreme Court at the end of June, and he does get a delay, is that really conceivable that they would have a January 6th federal trial, like after the second debate?
I mean, it is possible. Of course, there's always so much that you do. And they have been arguing there are millions of pages of discovery. What is the rush? We have all of this time. Let's go through this as we would any other federal trial. Special counsel has argued all along this is a matter of national importance. We think that people should know whether there's going to be a conviction in this case before this man's name appears on the ballot, if he indeed is the GOP nominee, as it looks like it will be. But I think even if we get this decision the last week of June, if it's one of those biggies that we get at the very end of the term again, from there, I think the Trump team is going to argue we have pretrial motions, we have discovery. That puts us through July, August, maybe September before we'd even be ready to argue this case. So the early fall is very conceivable for this.
And he could also get a favorable ruling by the high court. Judge Janine.
Good.
So I don't think that it's even gonna. I don't think we'll even have the trial, because, like Professor Dershowitz said, they're going to give a victory, a partial victory to Trump, which is all he needs. Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Barrett, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Roberts. It will almost certainly be 6-3 or 5-4 that Trump is immune. He has immunity. And I think that Democrats knew that, and they had to try desperately to admonish, reprimand the Supreme Court. This is President Trump, future President Trump, on Biden's really very bizarre State of the Union speech.
Run from his record and lying like crazy to try and escape accountability for the horrific devastation he and his party have created. All the while, they continue the very policies that are causing this horror show to go. We cannot take it any longer as a country. Joe Biden's sad excuse for a State of the Union address aside, here are the facts. When I left office, we gave Joe Biden the most secure border in U.S. history. We gave him remain in Mexico, very tough to get, but I got it. Safe third agreements, the asylum ban, Title 42, 571 miles of border wall, rapid deportations, and much more. We had the safest border in the history of our country.
When you see Trump, when you hear Trump, he enunciates. You can understand what he's saying. Okay? He enunciates. He communicates effectively. He doesn't slur his speech and make up words and mumble. And Democrats see the same things that we do and everybody else does. They just don't care. It's just a purely the attainment of political power. That's it.
As soon as he got in, Crooked Joe and his radical left lunatics deliberately dismantled each and every one of those policies that were so good, that gave us this best border. According to Tom Homan, according to Brandon Judd, the top people, they said it was the single best border we've ever had in recorded history. What's happened now is a horror show. The country, our country, is being laughed at all over the world. Over the past 3 years, Biden has actively aided and abetted the importation of your communities at any invasion. But they have no identification. Many come from mental institutions. Many come from prisons. They're terrorists. We have a calamity the likes of which we've never seen before. The very first bill Joe Biden sent to Congress was a plan to turn illegal aliens into voting citizens. That's just what we need. No matter what Crooked Joe says, his actions prove his priority is to import a colossal side of a feeble Joe Biden talking about shrinkflation. The term he uses is one of the most ridiculous things this country has ever seen. Shrinkflation is just another way of saying inflation. It means that you're losing a lot of money because these people don't know what they're doing. It was all caused by Crooked Joe Biden and the people that surround him. And they are radical left Marxists and fascists and communists and socialists. We have people running our country, the likes of which we have never seen before. He and the communists and his party looted trillions of dollars from you and spent it on illegal aliens and the Green New Scam, triggering the highest inflation in many, many decades. If your packages are getting smaller, that's the reason why, under my leadership, there was no inflation. We had the greatest economy in the history of the world. It's time to tell crooked Joe Biden, you're fired. Priority is to import a
So, ladies and gentlemen, it is pretty obvious that Trump is on his way to victory. Okay, the only way, the absolute only way they could stop this, stop Trump, is to convict him. But they're not going to be able to convict him. They might get a conviction in New York for the hush money, but that won't work in the manner that they hope. Congress will probably get involved. And the same thing that happened in Georgia could happen in New York as well in terms of prosecutors. So you could find out that there are prosecutors having romantic relationships in New York, possible misuse of federal funds because the FEC is a federal institution. So generally, a federal institution isn't a federal crime. You do need the federal government, the DOJ, to go after the individual. What happened in New York is there were misdemeanors, and then the misdemeanors were turned into federal crimes because of very bizarre. It's a very bizarre indictment where Trump, under New York law, was indicted for misdemeanors, but then they went after him and said, "Oh, but you know what? The misdemeanors pertain to federal campaign issues, so therefore it's a federal crime. So it's a felony." Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel. I'll be back tonight, probably around 10 p.m. Eastern. So if not tonight, for sure tomorrow at around 2 p.m. or 1:30 p.m. But hit subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very, very much. I will see you, to my super chat, to the members. Thank you. I'll see you either tonight, definitely tomorrow,